felt you. Thousand welcomes to the Village Oak Tree for July 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Terrence O'Donnell, and I wish to welcome everyone who's watching or listening for joining us today. I am hosting my two great friends once again for another discussion about current events and an existential topic that came up over a podcast shared by Mitch with me yesterday. I finished watching it today, and it's pretty eye-opening. So once again, let me welcome Mitch and Miss Frances, and let's see what's going on in our worlds today. All right, here we are. The gang's all here.
Hey, Terry.
So, first thing out of the bat, okay, Mitch, you live in Florida. Miss Frances, you live in Connecticut, which is New England. And I live right in the middle, okay? So what's going on in your neighborhoods this week?
You want to go first, Frances? You want to go, Frances?
Can you hear us?
Okay. Oh, okay. I'll start then.
Sure, yeah.
Let's put it this way. I have just really been paying attention to the weather because it's been something. Insane. Yep. We've had about 90-degree days for the last, at least 2 weeks or so. And this is really unusual for New England, except for, I guess you could say, the last 3 years or so. And I can't help but think, what an impact it has on people who don't have necessary funds for, say, utilities, and air conditioning and whatnot. I know this because I was supposed to get an air conditioning compressor 2 years ago. I couldn't afford it. It was $7,000. So I am just right now relying on any fans that I have around here.
Wow.
Yeah, it is just really crazy. And then I am worried about the roof leaking and everything because that I've been checking out is about $50,000 to replace.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking, where is this money going to come from?
Yeah.
And then,
wouldn't we all?
of course, worrying about how insurance is going to be going up because, with all of this climate change, there are open wars to be insurance, and there's nothing to think about. I mean, this is, you can think our politicians really don't give a crap about this because they're all 1%ers. They don't have to worry about replacing a compressor. They don't have to worry about, their, insurance going up or replacing a roof because it's just easy for them.
Right.
And that's the same reason why they don't understand things like inflation, which is still a factor. No matter what they say about how inflation is going down and everything, everything is much better. I don't drive insurance doesn't mean anything. Although I hear that is going up as well too. But for me, groceries are still high. Pet food is in. You have a dog. You have at least one dog, right?
Yeah, I got a little one.
I got a big one.
So yeah, I'd say that climate change is a really serious crisis, and something really needs to be done about that. About it, and the other day Biden was talking about how we should raise taxes on millionaires or the billionaires up to 25%. 6%, like back in World War II, that's the way. Actually, even Herbert Hoover, he raised the top tax rate up to 86%, and I'm thinking that's really the only thing we can do to salvage anything because Terrence, the infrastructure and just trying to have to deal with all of the consequences from climate change.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even counting, the other things like public services, all of that. So yeah, something really major has to be done. And I think that's why people are just really fed up with the two parties because they're not really doing anything at all.
Right. And you're right. Your weather is exasperated where I'm at here.
I'm off my soapbox. Off my soapbox.
Well, that's okay because, you're right. So the weather you're experiencing up north is worse where I'm at here in the mid-states. The humidity has been through the roof. It rained hard yesterday. The remnants of that hurricane that came through Texas. But before that, humidity levels were, almost unbearable outside. You couldn't stay outside for very long. Now, I did a bunch of outdoor work last Monday, and I was soaking wet working out in my garage trying to get some stuff done. It was unreal. I mean, I call that jungle weather. It reminds me of the days when I was tramping the jungles of the Far East in the 70s, and that's how bad it was. And then, of course, we get a little spot of rain. It was almost like monsoon season. Only this time of year, it's a little late for monsoon season. So, go figure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced monsoons over in the Far East jungles and stuff, and that's about what it reminds me of.
It's amazing. Yeah. Well, just to jump in on my end of the woods, our governor recently vetoed a bill where public beaches could be closed if they detected any kind of bacteria or contamination in the water.
What?
He thought that the public agencies that had the oversight had too much power.
Oh, my God. So
he vetoed the bill at a time when we're getting septic overflow into the beach water, into the ocean water. And the public does not know, cannot know, because the reporting agencies are not allowed to give that information out. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
What our governor is doing. It's crazy. So I looked at a TikTok recently where the family went to a lake. The dogs jumped in, and that same day the dog died because he picked up cyanobacteria or some sort of contamination that takes place in fresh water. And they could not know because the agencies, again, that were responsible for alerting the people are delayed a couple of days. So even though they knew that there was bacteria or algae in the water, they could not report it in a timely way to help the public deal with that. And that's what our governor is doing. So that tells me that in an attempt to keep the lid on climate change and to prevent people from freaking out and panicking, the authorities are going to clamp down on information that will save us, that will protect us. That's the impression I'm getting. Right? After hurricanes, for example, after Hurricane Ian, I remember looking it up. The incidences of flesh-eating bacteria went up in the waters and lakes around in the path of the hurricane. But because DeSantis vetoed this bill, people will not be alerted in time. So I think it's dangerous. I think it's wrong. I think these people are just trying to shut down dissent and information getting out that will help people freak out. And I think we're going to see more of it. John Wines, they don't want us to panic. They don't want us to freak out. So they're going to be clamping down on that flow of information to us as the public. So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. It pisses me off.
Well, yeah, it should. I mean, I have to wonder, is there some kind of kickback coming from maybe some corporations over this?
Who knows? But my impression is that he doesn't want the public. They have this idea of freedom where public agencies shouldn't be allowed to clamp down on people's ability to get into the water, I guess. Does it make sense?
Well, there's a difference between, stopping you from going swimming outright and public safety.
Yeah. Right. So I'm at a loss.
That's crazy.
But that's what's going on in Florida. And mark my words, other red states are likely to follow.
Well, yeah. I mean, this business in Texas right now. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the state of Texas, their whole power grid in the state of Texas is all privatized.
Yeah.
Okay. So because it's privatized, and it's been this way for years, because it's privatized, every time they have some sort of a climate disaster over there, whether it's a hurricane, like when Harvey came through in 2016, and now Beryl just came through and knocked out millions of people's power in Houston, and, stuff like that. Plus, excessive heat, so on and so forth. Whenever it knocks out sections of the power grid, it's only because these privatized companies don't have the money to keep it up. Okay. So it fails on them because it's old and needs to be upgraded. And of course, they're not going to pay for that. The government's not paying for it simply because it's privatized. It's up to the corporations to fix it. Well, we all know corporations never spend money on anything. Okay.
Correct.
So state of Texas endures power outages and deaths in needless deaths because of this kind of stupid stuff, but nobody cares.
Meanwhile,
Nobody cares.
we're sending $100 billion to Ukraine, and I mean,
right. Well, that's the other
why
part.
are they doing this to us? We live here.
Right. And that's, so here's the thing. I was watching some news feeds here recently. So just out of curiosity, did you guys pay attention to the recent European elections? I mean, this also includes the UK. Not that the UK really was that much different. I mean, they
Yes.
traded the Tories for Labour, but
Yes.
Keir Starmer's really not going to change anything. Okay. We all know that. All right.
We all know that.
That's beside the point. The big
Yeah.
one that got everybody's attention, though, was the French elections.
The French.
He's a
elections,
basic
yeah.
Blairite. He's a basic Blairite. That's
Right. Keir Starmer, yeah. He's going to be an idiot like the rest of them. My only thing with Keir Starmer, and I was reading this, so you got to understand, I subscribe to publications out of Ireland, okay? Most notably from the Sinn Féin. So I get to read RTE news and other, EU news and stuff like that. But primarily, I want to say promotional, I guess, if you want to call it, political promotions from Sinn Féin. Plus, I watch RTE News, which is basically one of their primary news outlets. Not everything they publish is always good, but still, you get some interesting stuff. Anyway, point is, Keir Starmer promised Northern Ireland that he would rescind this latest British law that they passed here 3 or 4 months ago, saying that Northern Ireland could not seek redress for English atrocities committed during the Troubles. They could not prosecute English soldiers for the atrocities they committed against Irish citizens back during the Troubles. This has been an ongoing lawsuit for a couple of decades now. They keep finding more things and they keep adding to it. But like I said, the Tory government shut it down recently. Sunak and his predecessors said, no, we're not going to do that. You can't have access to, you're not going to be able to touch English soldiers, all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously, the Irish in Northern Ireland got really upset, okay? Both the Unionists and the Catholics. Well, it looks like Keir Starmer's promised that he's going to veto that and rescind it and let them follow through with it. So I'm waiting to see if, Keir Starmer is wishy-washy as everybody says he is. I want to see if he's going to follow through. He promised, but is he going to keep his promise? Time will tell. But that's on that front as far as the UK goes. But the big issue is when everybody's kind of wondering what's going to happen next is obviously all the furor about the right-wing parliament and Marine Le Pen's government thinking, oh, I'm going to take over, and oops, not. But the problem is they swung to the extreme left. And it's like I was watching somebody this morning on my YouTube news, and they said, was Richard Wolff, actually. I was watching him being interviewed by Elena Petrova this morning. And, one of the things he said was that they went all the way to the left. And so there is no centrist government anymore. And the big thing about that is that extreme left means socialism. Okay.
Right.
Bernie Sanders type stuff. And so even though they're that, and that's okay, everybody's waiting to see how that's going to work out as far as, future policies in France and so on and so forth. Everybody's wondering, well, are we going to do that here in the United States? That's the big question right now. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, Miss Francis, I know you're a big fan, okay? But Bernie Sanders has already said, no, I'm not running again, so on and so forth. Now AOC is starting to step up a little bit. Some of her friends are starting to step up a little bit. Now, not that any of them are going to run for president, especially at this point, but it just shows that there may be a future trend to the extreme left in this country, because as we know, when people get really upset at one side, they always veer all the way to the other side. There's nobody ever meets in the middle. Okay. That doesn't have to be here in the United States. It's pretty much everywhere. You have a bunch of extremists that everybody hates on one side. So everybody moves to the other side. And that's how that goes. So, that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for, in the future here as far as the U.S. goes. Is the U.S. politics going to start moving hard left, really hard left? Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to work out, because here's the other thing about this. So let me ask you guys the next question. With everything that's been going on in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and everything that happened with Joe Biden at the NATO conference that hit the news, okay, and as best as his aides are trying to dumb it all down and so on and so forth, what do you think? Is Joe Biden physically and mentally fit for office? Ms. Francis, I'll give you first shot at it.
Looks like she froze.
Yeah, I think she's.
Okay.
Maybe not there. Well, while she's figuring out, what do you think?
Joe Biden I think his stick has left the ice. Are you back with us, Francis? I think Joe Biden can't make a proper decision. I think when you listen to him speak, he refers to Zelensky as Vice President Putin or President Putin.
Yeah.
He's mixing people up. It's difficult to believe that he will be able to manage any kind of serious conflict that may come out of all of this.
Well, I mean,
Francis,
that's pretty obvious. Look what he's doing with Gaza and Ukraine.
Yeah. It's getting worse.
Yeah. Well, it's only going to get worse. So, the big thing I'm looking at right now is he's obviously saying, no, I'm going to stick it out. But with the DNC coming up soon, are the Democratic voters in this country going to say, hey, you're done? Okay, we're voting for somebody else. I mean, what do you think the odds of that?
Francis, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
She's getting a significant lag, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave her out, though. Want to jump in, Francis?
By the way, I'm missing a lot of what you two are saying because the connection is going really bad again.
Okay.
We're so sorry about that.
Yeah, we kind of figured as much. It's okay. We'll do the best you can. All right, Mitch, carry on. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think that it's late for them to sub somebody in to replace Biden. So they may want to keep on beating that dead horse. And I think it's a losing strategy.
What about Kamala Harris?
Well, honestly, I don't think that America is ready for its first female president and a female black president. Of that, I don't think they're ready.
Yeah, no,
so
I agree with you.
That's not going to happen, in my opinion.
So even as bad as Donald Trump is, you still don't think she could beat him?
Yeah, I don't think she can beat Donald Trump because
Okay.
people are going to avoid voting for Biden. They may not come to the polls. And the people that are going to vote for Trump are going to come, regardless. So Trump is likely to be the next president, unless people find a way to unite behind a third party. And I don't see it.
I don't see that happening. Not this stage of the game.
Mm-mm.
I mean, most of these third-party candidates aren't even on the ballots in all the states.
Yeah. So
they weren't even on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think will be the consequences then of a Trump presidency?
Well, the way they're handling this whole thing is, I think, with the fitness of Biden is absolutely.
Go ahead.
She's cutting out pretty bad.
Oh, are you talking to me or?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. You go
well,
ahead.
I thought you were still going. I thought you were still
No.
speaking.
Your
Yeah, I was going
audio
to say that
lag
the
is
way that
pretty.
they're handling this whole business with Biden is just absolutely ridiculous because you have all these senators who know that he's going to fail. I mean, that, he definitely is not going to win at this point. I mean, his approval rating is still going down.
Right.
And yet they're so afraid to speak up. And the only reason why they're now beginning to speak up is because the donors are trying to withdraw the money,
Yep.
wistdraw funding. So you
I
can
saw
tell
some of
that that's really all they care about, just the funding.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yet at the same time, I mean, I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever been on the side of the funders because I'm thinking, there's no way he can. I'm like, he's only deteriorating. I mean, he may have a good or a bad day, but I know that he's going to, keep going downhill for the next, God knows how long.
Right. Well, have we noticed?
I
in
mean,
the
he
last
may not
3 weeks,
even make it past the election.
as we've noticed in the last 3 weeks, he's having more bad days than good days.
Yes, I've been noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the pressure is getting to him, and he can't handle it.
Well, he said he's no good after 8 o'clock. So.
Well, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry, the president's a 24/7 job. If you're not up to it, go home.
Go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
And I heard that he was just like an hour late to this Hispanic caucus.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. His aides are covering, everything I've been reading and listening to on YouTube. His aides are covering for him massively right now. I mean, Joe Biden's not running the government. Okay, all his people work for him. They're running the government and covering for him.
Yep.
It's almost obvious. Joe Biden is only doing the things in public that he knows he absolutely can't get away with not doing. And when he does show up, he's only half there.
It's very sad.
It is. And, it's what really intrigues me is the fact that the American public knows about this. So I have to wonder what's going to happen at the DNC. I mean, I'm sorry, but something's going to give. I mean, these people know it. And with all of the stuff that's going on in the media right now, and a lot of it is coming from the right. And so they're making things worse. And I have to wonder, with all of the media coverage swinging to the right, and the left side of this whole equation is poo-pooing and telling us everything's okay, there's nobody in the middle saying, hey, you know what? We need to fix this.
Am I the only one who
everybody's in limbo?
has difficulties hearing?
Well, hang on as best you can. So I'm gonna kind of change gears here a little bit. Now we're going to get into. I got something a little bit about immigration because it's starting to become a hot button topic again. Okay, I picked up a news feed here not too long ago. United States just deported 100 Chinese migrants recently, and they sent them back to China. Okay, now you have to know they came up through the Darien Gap, got rounded up in the United States. United States just shipped them back to China. The Chinese government is going to come down hard on these people for leaving the country illegally. So just to give you a little bit of personal context, my wife and I have a friend, and she's went to visit relatives in China. And then when she got over there, they found out that she was a member of from the old days, she was a member of the communist, the Chinese Communist Party. So they took her passport away from her, told her she couldn't leave the country.
Wow.
Okay. So she's been stuck there for several months.
Is this your wife that you're talking about?
No.
Is this your wife that you're talking about?
It's a friend of ours. She's married to an American.
Oh, okay.
She went overseas to visit relatives, and they won't let her come home. But it's not just her. Of course, my wife talks to her relatives over there in northern China, and they're telling us basically that nobody's allowed to leave the country right now, period. If you're in China right now, if you're a Chinese citizen, you're not allowed to leave the country. Okay? So everybody's kind of wondering what happens. China's starting to, run around the world saying, hey, we're the good guys. We're the good guys. Yeah, no, not at all. Okay.
Right.
they're great. Their economy is booming. That's obvious, and they're doing all kinds of stuff that way, making themselves rich. But as far as taking care of the people, no, it's the same old stuff. Actually
Right.
getting worse. So there's that. But the other part of it is they're still being aggressive. So I've got another news story that I picked up. So the United States right now is all upset because the Chinese government has got permission from the Cubans to build a radar site right next door to Guantanamo Bay.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
I want to send me a link on that one. I want to read that one.
I have the link to the news article.
That was a good one.
Okay. This came out a couple weeks ago. So, yes, obviously, like I said, the United States can't do anything about it because the Chinese they're building it on Cuban soil and it's outside, but it's close enough to Guantanamo Bay to intercept any kind of communications coming out of the base.
Right. Yes.
So, they haven't finished building it yet, I think, from what I was reading, but obviously the United States is all upset. So, everybody right now is kind of focused on the Russians, so to speak, but the Chinese are starting to move into our back door here.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I was reading, another part of that Sean Ryan interview that I didn't talk about a little bit. They talked a little bit about Chinese and North Korean nuclear submarines being so stealthy right now that they're operating within a couple 100 miles of the Pacific West Coast and nobody knows they're there.
It doesn't surprise me. The technology is really getting,
right. Yeah,
it's equalizing across the board. So
it is.
We're getting to the point where we need to be more diplomatic.
That's not going to happen.
I'm seeing it's not happening, but it would be good if it did.
Right. Well, so let's kind of get into this Sean Ryan thing. Okay. So let me describe the video to you a little bit. All right. For Miss Francis' sake. So the YouTube video runs 3 hours and 49 minutes. So
the U.S. does not care for diplomacy.
Yeah. The big thing is you need to dedicate a lot of time to watching this. But it's a definite eye-opener because basically he's interviewing an author, okay? So I'm going to bring you guys up a picture. This is the book that she's talking about with Sean Ryan in the podcast, okay? So this is the book. It just came out for sale on March of this year. Now, she, as it says on the cover, she's the New York Times best-selling author. She's written several books on all kinds of things having to deal with, military-industrial complex and all kinds of stuff. But like I said, this is the author that he was interviewing, and so you get an idea. Now, like I said, let me tell you a little bit about this book. And I got this right from the author, all right? In this interview she was doing with Sean Ryan, this book describes basically nuclear warhead technology, which by her own disclaimer, she's an investigative journalist. And so she's interviewed tons and tons of people over all this stuff and some very high profile people. Okay. So she's taken all this information, put it in his book. So, we're talking about how nuclear warheads are created, what they're made out of, what they can do, so on and so forth. The technology behind boosting them and how they go through the air, where they can land, all kinds of stuff. A lot of technical stuff, but like I said, I'll save you guys from being bored of. But if you really want to know, watch that video. Okay. But the big thing is here, one of the things that got me going on this was her description of what would happen, how a nuclear war would start. Okay. So in her scenario in this book, she talks about how North Korea would have a nuclear satellite, a nuclear bomb satellite in orbit, and they would fire a nuclear warhead at the United States from a satellite orbiting around the Earth. Because you got a madman, according to her, you have a madman who basically doesn't care if he commits suicide or not. All right. Now, what she talks about is the time frame it takes for when our satellites would detect the launch and how long it would take the United States to react, the process of the reaction, in other words, the standard operating procedure that our government has set up for such a scenario, and what would happen once this nuclear warhead, in her case, she uses an example of it was aimed at the Pentagon. Of course, it would take out Washington, D.C. once it took out the Pentagon. So, it's pretty according to what she talks about, and she didn't go into a lot of detail. So here's the thing. I will tell you a little bit about the history. So let's go back in time a little bit. All right. I'm going to show you the very first book that I ever read decades ago. I want to say decades back in, I want to say 1970s. This book right here was the first definitive classic that was written. It was written in 1957 and by an Australian about what would happen if you had a nuclear war and it basically took out the Northern Hemisphere. And this book is a 1957 version of Australians waiting for the world to end. Okay?
Okay.
It's a classic. If you've never read it, you should. All right?
Okay.
It's not real thick, but I recommend you read it just as kind of a primer. All right? Now, my favorite book is a little more modern. This is one that I read. It came out in 1988. I used to have this on my bookshelf, for a long time. I read it 2 or 3 times. This book right here. This is another classic. All right. The Last Ship by William Brinkley. And this book basically is a story written about a U.S. American Navy destroyer that is out on patrol out in the middle of nowhere when nuclear war happens in the Northern Hemisphere between Russia and the United States. And they take each other out, and there's basically nothing left. So the ship shows up on the American West Coast, not getting any radio signals from anywhere, and they're coming up to investigate, and they run into a nuclear winter, basically a radiological cloud, and of course they're testing it, so on and so forth. They realize what happened, and so they come up close enough, without getting contaminated, so on and so forth, and try to reach out to see if anybody's alive. And, a little bit of a kind of give away a little bit. They do get a faint radio signal on a civilian ham radio briefly, and then it dies out while they're there. And then the rest of the book is about survival. What are they going to do? And, they turn around and head south because they realize that they are the last survivors, and the rest of the world is dying. There's a nuclear winter coming. It's going to take out the whole world. This cloud of radiological particles is moving down into the southern hemisphere, and that the only safe place left, and this is towards the end of the book, the only safe place left where they're going to go down and die is Antarctica. Okay? That's the last bastion of refuge until the whole world gets covered up and everybody dies. All right? Mm-hmm. So like I said, the whole book is about discovery, survival, and, the realization that everybody's going to die. Okay? As I said, it's a classic. It's another book that I highly recommend that if you have time, put it on your shelf and read it. Okay? And then, like I said, this one, Nuclear War with Andy Jacobson, I'm afraid to read it. Okay? Simply because I already know what's inside of it. And it's everything that I got taught about nuclear war, if it should happen. All right? And I say that only because during the Cold War days, the 1970s, the 1980s, and, the early 90s, but mostly the 70s and 80s for me, I went to a lot of confidential, considered classified briefings on Russian capabilities, Russian military tactics, all this kind of stuff. All right. And also a lot of training on how to prepare for nuclear warfare. Okay. What happens if a nuclear bomb goes off? What do you do for an EMP? What happens? How do you protect yourself from radiation and all that kind of stuff? I went through so many trainings on this stuff, both lectures and stuff like that, literature, plus, actual training drills and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And so it was drilled and drilled and drilled into us for years, preparing for anything. And the big thing about it is, like she talks about in his interview, is that ultimately nobody survives. Okay. And here's one of the things, and I'll describe a little bit of what she said in the interview. If I forget what size she said, let's say a 3 megaton nuclear warhead, an ICBM, got shot from, let's say, North Korea, just one, okay? Or it came off this satellite, all right? Either way, you have a megaton nuclear warhead, hits the Pentagon. Well, she said that the blast radius from something like that is going to leave a glass crater about 3 miles in diameter. Okay? The initial blast is going to go 10 miles. It'll wipe out everything in a 10 to 50 mile radius. I mean, literally wipe everything out, as in flatten buildings, set fire to everything. Everything will be incinerated. I mean, literally everything. Every life form, every inch of structure, you name it, it's going to be gone. Okay. Everything in the 3 mile radius is going to be incinerated into atoms, and anything beyond that, exponentially until it, the blast wave and the radiation and everything. Then you got to deal with the radiation fallout and so on. Well, what she goes on to say is that the United States has a protocol in place if something like that should happen. All right. So what's going to happen, she says, is that nuclear submarines that are running around over there off the coast of Korea are going to fire, because the president's going to do his 90-minute, I think it's some kind of 90-minute scenario, forget 9 minutes, something. I don't know. You'll have to watch the Sean Ryan video to get the exact thing. But the very short amount of time that the president of the United States is going to make a decision, and they're going to launch everything, submarine, missiles, ICBMs from the United States, and they're going to obliterate North Korea. Well, the problem is, like she talks about in the latter part of that video, is that these missiles, not the ones from the submarines, but the ones coming from the United States, have to fly over Russian territory. And contrary to popular belief, the Russian radar technology over there, their so-called detection awareness, is out of date. They can't tell where these missiles are exactly coming from. They know where they're coming from. They don't know where they're going to land. So the Russians think they're coming to Russia. So they're going to automatically launch to the United States. Okay? So now you have nuclear Armageddon. Thousands of nuclear warheads flying through the air at each other, and, the world goes up in smoke. All right? There will be no survivors, period. Yeah. In the initial blasts would hit and wipe out the United States. And there might be small pockets of initial survivors that were not close enough to the blast range where they would actually survive, but the radiation would get to them. Radiation sickness would get to them, and if that didn't get to them, they wouldn't survive the nuclear winter when it comes. Okay, correct. So ultimately, all life on Earth pretty much is going to get wiped out. And what she said was that when the asteroid hit off the Yucatan Peninsula, tens of thousands of years ago, it wiped out 70% of life on Earth. Well, this is going to be, she said, this would be similar to the same thing. Okay. And that all of life on the United States, well, not just the United States, all of life in the world, according to these, what she's got in her book, basically would get dropped down to, say, 20 to 30% of the 8 billion people on the planet. And the survivors would be reverted back to hunter-gatherers until radiation sickness and nuclear winter and all that. And she said nuclear winter would probably last 8 to 10 years. Turn the northern hemisphere into an ice age, a serious ice age, and so on and so forth, for about 10 years or so. And then after things warm up a little bit, then you're going to have a mess to clean up. So that's that kind of scenario that she says is in her book. As I said, I went through so many trainings on these scenarios. I know them by heart. So I know it. I already know what's in the book. I don't have to read it. Okay. But the big thing is you you take that. Everybody in the Kremlin, everybody but North Korea knows this. The North Koreans, on some level, they have to know this. But the question of the day is for North Korea, are they suicidal? Okay. That's the existential question. Is North Korea's leader, is he suicidal? And that's what everybody's wanting. That's the question everybody's asking. Okay. Because he seems to be the wild card. And especially now that Russia has given him advanced weapons.
Correct. And not only that, but they have a military treaty in place. So if you attack North Korea, you attack Russia.
Right.
So, but that whole thing came about because Russia is increasingly being pressured by NATO.
Right.
So I believe Pyongyang have been sending them missiles.
Yeah.
I saw a news article that said it could be anywhere up to 5 million missiles. I could be exaggerated, but I'll get back to the article.
It wouldn't surprise me that of course we know that's been going on because they found busted munitions in Ukraine with from North Korea. So that's a given. Okay, that's just conventional weapons though to this point.
Conventional at this point.
Russia's not stupid enough to give North Korea any advanced nuclear warheads or anything like that. But as we know, North Korea already has it. So what their technology is old school. But this is another thing she talks about in her book is that our ICBMs are old school technology. So they can't
analog.
be
I remember getting to that part. Yes.
Yeah. They can't be hacked. So you have to know North Korea is doing the same thing.
Yeah. I also I got to the part in the video where she was saying that when they get after the boost phase and they get to traveling over into the atmosphere before they hit the target, they're flying at 14,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing can hit that. That's Mach 20 and above, right?
Yeah.
You can't hit that.
Nothing that can hit that. Although the United States, we got a defense program. Well, as she said, according to her sources, they'd be lucky to hit 40 to 50% of them if they're lucky.
If they're lucky. So we're saying that I also remember listening to Scott Ritter, and he was saying that the American doctrine when it comes to nuclear weapons is something along the lines of they don't want to have any other adversaries potentially being able to recover.
Right.
So the launch in the US would be all out. They will attack anybody in the hope that they can leave a small colony of Americans to survive.
Right.
So they will attack, even though India doesn't attack them. They may attack India, they may attack China, they may attack Pakistan. Whoever is not their ally will be a target in a nuclear war because they don't want anybody to have the potential of attacking them. So it'll be all out. Everyone's
all out. Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. It's
we need to not have in behavior from our politicians that can inspire these kinds of attacks. And I saw just this week that they're sending F-16s to Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, they've been promising those F-16s since last year. And
Putin said that if he's going to attack the airports from which they launch them, because F-16s can carry nukes.
Right.
That's nuclear war because they're going to launch them from Poland or wherever that's nearby.
Right. Well,
and
that's
just going to take those airports
here's the other part of that. One of the things that these people have been saying, and I don't know how true it may be one way or the other, but they're saying that they're not going to invoke Article 5 of the NATO treaty if Ukrainian pilots are flying F-16s out of Poland to hit targets in Russia. They'll just take out the airplanes, okay? And Russia may take out the airports there on eastern Poland, but that'll be it. It'll be a limited strike just to knock out these assets. And so, the EU is saying, no, that's not going to violate Article 5, and so on and so forth. But I have to ask myself, given what's going on over there in Europe right now, I don't believe that for a minute.
I don't think that. The Europeans are seeing the unraveling of their economic prosperity,
Yes.
and they cannot allow Russia / China / the rest of them, the BRICS, to take precedence over what's going on there because they can see the decline coming for them.
Yep.
So Ukraine is a red line for them as well. They're not going to let that go.
Nope.
I don't see them letting it go at all.
See, and that's a problem, okay? Because nobody wants to listen. You know, if you ask the people here in the United States and the EU, just regular people on the street, we're all saying the same thing. I mean, the majority of us, 70% of us or more, I think in some polls it's over 80%, are saying we're wrong, okay? We need to back out of that and let it go. But yet our politicians aren't listening to us. In Germany,
Well, I mean, they're
with
both.
that right now. So go back to what we were talking about with the French elections. One of the things that's going to come out with these elections in France is that they're going to strip their support from this Ukrainian war. You wait, it's coming. They've already said.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so
they've already
because
said.
we need to have some negotiations. We don't need to get to a point where nukes are involved.
Well, yeah, and there's that. Okay, you know, Putin says, "Oh well, I'm just going to use tactical nukes." Well, you know what? There's no such thing as a tactical nuke. Okay,
Correct.
It's a low
nuke
yield,
is
whatever, but you're going to have a problem with the fallout. I don't care how small it is. Okay, that's just it. When you drop one of those things, you contaminate everything for years and years afterwards. As soon as it lets go. All right, that's the bottom line. And I'm sorry, there's just no walking back from that. So I'm hoping that the Kremlin is just posturing, which we all hope they are. But my scary thing is what's Biden and his crew, because he's the one running the show here. The EU is going to follow whatever he says. Okay, so we already know Biden probably is not making these decisions. I mean, I have to think he's probably only just following. He's just following along with whatever somebody puts in front of him, and they tell him, "Yeah, this is a good idea." He probably only has a vague idea of what he's reading, and all that kind of stuff. So I got to wonder what's going on with these people. I mean, do they not seriously understand the consequences of what they're doing?
Well, if they're being bought and paid for by the military-industrial complex, I mean, they got the parachutes. They don't care what happens to the rest of us. Like Francis was saying earlier on, they have an exit strategy for their families. And
they don't understand that there is no exit strategy. Okay? If somebody starts dropping bombs on the United States, there is no exit strategy. Everybody dies.
Yeah. What do you think will happen if the Houthis use a Russian missile to take out an American warship? Not necessarily a carrier, but one of the destroyers in the area.
Frigate or a destroyer? Well,
yeah.
It's a very real possibility if things keep going. And
well,
yes.
I've been reading that Houthis are being armed by Russia.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's coming. There's a very real possibility that a frigate or a destroyer that's got a phalanx and, a missile defense system on it is going to miss something, and a advanced Russian missile is going to blow a hole inside of one of those ships. So you guys remember a couple of decades ago when the USS Cole got that bomb that took out the side of the ship, killed about 17 sailors?
I don't remember.
So this is a Navy frigate. It was in port in Qatar. I think it was Qatar. All right. Just a routine port visit. And some terrorists got a hold of a bomb, and they were part of a work crew. Okay.
Right.
And they put a bomb on the side of the ship, and it didn't get caught, and it blew a hole on the side of the ship and killed about 17 sailors, injured a dozen or so others, and it was a really big deal. Okay,
right.
So the thing is, one of these missiles from the Houthis would probably do similar damage and not take the ship outright. Okay. Now you got to understand, American ships are built pretty watertight, so there's a good possibility that if it didn't hit below the waterline, then they could minimize the damage enough till they could limp back to a port And they could salvage the ship. There would be some dead sailors and so on and so forth. Now, what would the United States do? Well, we already see what they're trying to do. They're trying to bomb the Houthis, and it's not working out so good. So then what?
Right. Yeah, so then what? I mean, what we're seeing is people with low technology being able to stand up to a much bigger force. I shouldn't say low technology, but with the current state of technology, people that are not as technologically advanced can resist. And they seem to be sticking their fingers in the face of the United States military forces. So how long can the U.S. continue to project force around the world,
Not for
given
very
the
long.
fact that it's sending our economy into some trouble? Inflation is coming out of it. Those people in Texas are not going to be happy.
Nope.
Sitting and sweltering, knowing that we're sending money abroad and their
Right.
lives are being, unraveled. So, how long can we keep this up?
Well, that's just it. Okay. That's the problem. Okay.
Okay.
We don't know. We don't know how that's going to work out. Biggest problem we have is our government leaders aren't listening to anybody. Okay. They are dead set on destroying Russia. Okay. Bottom
But
line.
it's not going to happen.
We know
Because
that.
Russia isn't
We know
alone.
that.
Russia has
Okay.
China behind them,
Yeah.
right?
Well, China's not really doing anything other than supplying them with materials, logistics.
Right.
That's all
Right.
it is. Okay. But the idea that the United States wanted to choke the supply train off, well, obviously that didn't work. It actually only improved things for them. Okay.
I
Because they went around it.
that China is responsible for sending something like 70 to 80% of the semiconductors that are
Yep.
used in American missiles and
Yep.
tanks and planes. So it's not the high-tech stuff, but
No.
it's being used. And if they
Yep.
choke that off, I don't
Well,
think we
against
have
the Ukrainians, you
manufacturers
don't
here.
need real high-tech stuff. Okay.
Right.
I mean, thing is, what's going on right now in Ukraine is that you have not enough bodies anymore. Ukrainian army is severely decimated, all right, to the point of almost, they're almost finished. And yet we keep sending all this fancy technology over there, but the Ukrainians don't have anybody to run it. So it's becoming more and more dependent on NATO troops operating their equipment on the ground in Ukraine in order to help the Ukrainians. Well, Russia has to know about that. And so they're
They got
just waiting.
satellites there. So
They're just waiting. Russia really doesn't want to engage NATO troops, but they will take out in a defensive posture anything that starts getting serious about hurting Russian territory. So if NATO does any more stuff like Sevastopol on a regular basis, you're going to see a serious escalation, against NATO assets. So far, right now, Russia is playing the long game where they're boots on the ground. They're grinding away the Ukrainian army. They're trying to get to the point where the Ukrainians have no choice but to surrender what's left, whatever they got left, if they ever have anything left. And they want to get to the point where Zelensky and company over in Kiev, they don't have an army anymore. There's nothing, nobody left to fight. Okay? So they got to put the right flag up.
One of the things that sticks in my mind is that we have a lot of, they're using depleted uranium, for example.
Yeah.
So I read about that. They're using them in shells to take tanks out on that.
Mm-hmm.
They're using, we know that all the bombs that are being dropped contain high amounts of PFAS.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So those are hormone and endocrine disruptors. They cause reproductive harm. We know that the earth, we know that the numbers of people that left Ukraine, millions of people have gone, and they're not coming back.
Right.
Half of the population, or what's left, the male population, is decimated. It's not likely to be able to restart or replenish the population in Ukraine.
Soon.
So we're seeing a demographic collapse in Ukraine because of environmental environmental pollution.
That's right.
Damage to reproductive systems and migration and death.
Yep.
I don't think Ukraine is going to recover.
It won't. And that's what the West doesn't understand. They've taken it past the point of no return.
But can't Zelensky see that? Can't the Ukrainians
No,
see
no, no.
this?
You don't understand. Zelensky, he's not smart enough to see that. Okay.
Oh my God.
All he cares about is being buddies with NATO, EU, and the United States because it's in his best personal interest. Okay. It's in his best personal interest. That's the only reason he's doing what he's doing. What everybody's waiting for, and I agree with these guys that are running the podcast circuits, they're all saying the same thing. They're waiting for the Ukrainian military to go in there and put a bullet in his brain and be done with it and then surrender.
I'm thinking that's going to happen. I really
Yeah.
think that's going to happen.
It's
The
gonna
people on
happen.
the far right are going to take him out because they're not going to get
They're
what they
either going
want.
to shoot him or they're going to put him on a train or a plane or something, and they're going to say, "You're done. Okay, we're surrendering. You're done here. Go away. You're not even a legitimate president anymore. Get out of Dodge. We don't care. You're in exile. See ya." And then they'll make a deal with the Russians.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it's just common sense. At this point, it doesn't make sense to continue this. It's just a massacre.
Right. I haven't watched all of the videos from the guys on the Judges show this week. I didn't have time to catch them all. I may watch some more of them later or some tomorrow when I have time. But the idea is that they've, a couple weeks ago, they were all saying the same thing, is that one, the Ukrainian army's finished. It's up to the, it's almost to the point where they're almost completely annihilated, and all of the munitions, all of the Patriot missiles, all of the whatevers, are not going to help them anymore. There's nobody to run the equipment.
Correct.
Okay, so it's going. It's basically we're throwing stuff into a black hole, and that's it. But the West doesn't understand that.
And the other people that are paying close attention to this would be China.
Yeah.
They're observing how the West conducts their wars.
That's right.
And figuring out how they can position themselves.
Or maybe he doesn't want to
advantage.
understand it.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's how that is. China right now is playing their game, okay?
Taking
Their
notes.
friends, and I put that in quotation marks with the Russians only because it's in their best interest to do so. But that could change at any given moment. Okay. As long as it suits the Chinese, they'll maintain a relationship. But the minute it doesn't, they're gone. Okay. Right. That's that. But the other part of it is Russia is in a good position right now. And they know it. Okay. Yeah. So I agree with the pundits that are coming on these shows, and they're all saying the same thing. Russia's playing the long game. They're trying really hard to do this attrition with the Ukrainians, trying to battle. And, like you said earlier, this business with the F-16s, well, you know what? As soon as Russia shoots a few of them out of the sky, a lot of that's going to stop.
Well, the other thing that at the back of my mind, I'm wondering if Putin wants a longer war. Because the longer the war goes on, the more political and economic trouble America gets into.
Well, there's part of that. I don't think he wants to drag it out too long. I think the consensus is he wants to drag it out long enough to see who's going to end up in the presidents.
Well, I think that they want to get Trump in.
No, Putin doesn't want Trump in.
Putin doesn't want Trump in?
Not anymore. No, he already knows Trump's going to be nothing but trouble. Okay? So, no, he's all about having Biden back in there because Biden is basically feeble-minded, and he knows it. Everybody's watching it. And this is what's going on in the Russian news right now.
That's a good point,
It's all over the Russian news right now, okay? In that they're just waiting to see what's going to happen in November because now Putin would rather have Biden in the office because Biden is just going to keep doing what he's doing. And yes, like you said, Putin knows, the Kremlin knows that if Biden keeps doing what he's doing, that it's going to hurt the United States more than it is the Russians.
Yeah, because this is hurting the United States.
Yep.
The amount of money that we spend to support, wars that just don't make sense.
Exactly.
We could be using to repair our infrastructure.
Basically, what China and Russia right now are trying to do is play the long game, and they want to bankrupt the United States.
Yes.
That's the end game.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. If and the United States is playing into this.
Oh yeah. Well, no, it's not playing into it. They're just stupid. Okay? They don't see it coming.
I mean, we don't have access to all the information they have, but they have this attitude that USA number one, rah rah, and
Yeah. No, I'm
that's not
sorry. Well, it's like
not
Richard Wolf
sensible.
was saying on Lena's show this morning. The United States is not number one anymore. They just don't want to admit it.
They don't want to admit it, and it's just
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I don't know. I'm scared of what's going to happen in November. I am literally scared because Donald Trump says he can end the war in Ukraine in the first day of office in January.
I believe
Now,
him.
he says that, but he doesn't say how he's going to do it. Okay.
He's
Now,
gonna make a deal with Putin.
yeah, and well, Putin is saying no, that's not going to happen. Okay.
Okay.
Putin
So-
will end the war on his terms.
Yeah, Putin is in a good position right now.
Yeah. He is, and he knows it.
Yeah, okay. So Putin knows that he's in a good position, so he's just gonna sit there and
Yeah.
keep letting things go as they go.
Right.
And what happens to us is we're gonna just drive our population into a distraction between not being able to get emergency supplies for all the storms coming our way.
Right. Well, that's just it. So Ms. Branson has requested I drop her out because her internet connection is so bad. So we can wave goodbye at this point. She's probably not even going to hear this. Okay. So it's all right. We'll say goodbye at this point. All right. So meanwhile, I'll leave her in the background for what it's worth. She can hear us, but she won't be able to participate. Here's the thing. What's going to happen, and this is another part of what I've been watching. Here's the other part of this is all these economists are saying the same thing. The banks are going to start failing here pretty soon. They're already saying that we have started to enter a recession. I don't care. They don't care, and I don't care that the government is saying otherwise. All right. The handwriting's on the wall. It's coming. All right. Now we have to be on the watch out for that myself. I'm kind of taking care of things on my end as much as I can because I'm a little worried. I mean, just to give you an example on the little stuff, my wife has started canning things this summer. She's putting stuff up for the winter. Okay.
Old school,
where she's putting stuff in freezer bags. She's getting her canning jars out, pulling stuff from the garden. And I'm encouraging her to do so. It won't be much, but it'll be a little bit. Because when the recession hits, the price of groceries is going to go through the roof. Okay. Yeah. We're going to start seeing shelves that are going to kind of go empty in certain areas, depending on where you live. Especially if you live in a rural area, the trucks aren't going to get there. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a real issue. And so I'm kind of preparing a little bit for that at the same time, but other essential services are going to stop, or I should say unessential services. Okay.
Well, I saw something that the cops are under no legal obligation to protect you.
No,
I think I read that somewhere.
No, they're not.
So they're not going to be coming around to your property if somebody's trying to break in.
Nope.
They probably will not have the vehicles ready or the cars, or even the staff, the people.
Not anymore.
Yeah. So we're going to have
you got to worry about the other side of the equation.
Mindful.
If you live in an urban area, then you got to worry about all the militarized cops. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the guys who get paid the most. And so they're all about all that military hardware and running around like some sort of quasi military system. And buckling down on people and so on and so forth. So you're going to have two sides of the coin. When I lived in Texas a few years ago, I lived just outside the city limits, even though the town I was living next to was very small. I lived just outside the city limits. And the first thing they told us when I moved into that house back in, early 2016 was that any kind of law enforcement was dependent on the county sheriffs.
Right.
The county sheriff was flat out, and I had a conversation with one of them, when we first moved in there. They were doing a community outreach type thing. And they flat told us that you need to take care of yourself because it'll be at least 5 minutes, if not, and most likely a lot more before we can get to you if you call us, because we don't have enough people and we're stretched out so thin, so on and so forth. And you think about that. Now that's Texas. Okay. But I had the same conversation with policing when I lived up in Northern Maine all those years ago. Same conversation. I lived outside city limits. So city police I was not really under their jurisdiction.
Right.
But there were no county sheriffs up there to get to anybody. Okay. You had a small handful covering a county the size of the state of Mississippi. And so no, policing, basically you're on your own, which is why back in 2006, they encouraged everybody who could and was willing to purchase a firearm, a pistol, basically, and take care of yourself, because you got to look after yourself, because otherwise we won't get to you in time. Not going to happen. So you understand this has been going on for a couple of decades at least.
Yeah.
All right. And this is from border to border, West Coast to East Coast. It's happening everywhere. Every rural town in America right now is having this same existential problem. Local law enforcement is stretched too thin or almost non-existent.
Right.
And so you got no choice but to take care of yourself. Bottom line. And as the inequalities continue to grow between the haves and the have-nots, people are going to get desperate because they're hungry, and they're going to start doing more things to feed themselves, and they won't be legal.
Yes.
So if you have something that somebody else wants because they're hungry or they're desperate enough to go after it, you're going to have to take care of yourself.
Wow. I can imagine how this is going to play out. People not having money. And then again, the monies that we're spending and sending overseas could be spent at home.
Yes.
It's just tragic that we're not letting. My sister said something interesting to me months ago. She said that the government gets what they want done based on the strength of the whip that they can apply to the American people.
Right.
And people will take that whip for as long as you can apply it until they say no more.
That's right.
So what we're seeing is we're almost there. We're being whipped. Right. And we've been forced to accept things that just don't sit well with us.
Well, that's it. We've been under the whip for 40 years, and it's starting to get to the point where we're saying enough's enough.
Enough's enough. Yeah.
Enough's enough.
I saw a guy on TikTok, an older guy, conservative, and he's standing out in his property in front of his homestead, and he's talking to the camera, and he's saying, the government wants to have a draft to send his kids into a war that he doesn't agree with. And he's not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And if they come for his kids, they won't know what hit them.
That's right.
Yeah, he meant it. He's going to defend his kids with whatever he has at his disposal, right?
Well, that's just it.
So,
and him and a lot of other people are going to say the same thing. Now, you understand, a guy like you're talking about was probably, amongst those who were protesting the war back in the late 60s and early 70s. Okay? Not necessarily
he certainly is armed.
Yeah, not necessarily a draft dodger, but he probably was one of those who objected to the war in some fashion, even though he may not have been on a protest marches or any of that kind of stuff. So now he's saying the same thing about his kids. I don't want my kids to be drafted because I didn't want to be drafted. Seriously.
But he doesn't agree with the wars.
No.
I don't either. With the wars, right?
I don't either.
So I don't think he's alone.
Oh, no, he's not. Not by a long shot.
Not alone. Not by a long shot.
As I said, I watched some news news pundits come out with statistics, and pretty, close to 80%, I think it's in the high 70s percentage of the United States right now is against these wars in Gaza and Ukraine, and they want it to stop. Okay? They want a ceasefire in Gaza. They want us to quit playing around over in Ukraine. Bring everybody home. Quit throwing money out there, because Americans aren't stupid. They see this. They know that we're throwing this money away. They know it.
Well, the thing about it is, it makes sense in a kind of way. Tell me if this makes sense to you. if you print money into existence and you leave it in the economy, it's going to cause a lot of inflation.
Hmm.
But if you send it overseas and you blow it up, then it's not in it's not in circulation. It's being used to produce something that is no
Well, the
longer
big
in
thing
the
about
country.
that is they're printing all this money because up until now, it's been the world's reserve currency. So,
People have been taking it out of the U.S. as well.
right.
Correct. Yeah.
See, that's just it. Well, that's stopping. And that's
It's
what's going
slowed
to kill the
down.
United States is that all
And
these countries are
yeah,
de-dollarizing right now. They're not using dollars for a reserve currency anymore. And these big countries like Saudi Arabia, China, Japan, and all these other ones are selling off their treasury bills like crazy.
I saw that this morning. Japan sold 23 million a billion this morning, right?
China's sold off
China's,
huge
I think,
amounts.
the last couple of years, when you add it up, 300 billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's figure
Saudi
one of those
Arabia
that-
sold off a major bunch of theirs.
And the thing that I don't
Yeah.
think people fully appreciate is that it's not that they want to de-dollarize totally. They just have an alternative.
They don't
So
want to be
whenever
dependent on it.
They don't want to be dependent on it. So if it is that a country like Russia wants to sell their oil, they don't need US.
Right.
China wants to buy oil, we don't need to use US.
Right.
So they will use their own currencies.
Right.
So even though the systems are in place to have the US being used, it won't be.
No.
Or it'll be used significantly less
Right.
to get around sanctions, to
Right.
facilitate in other people's trade
Yeah.
in their interest. So it's going to affect us here in a big way.
Oh, yeah. Big.
It's not going to stop. That's what I'm trying to say is it's not going to stop.
Nope.
It's just going to slow down.
Well, that's just it. The value of the dollar is going to drop. Okay.
Mhm.
The American stock markets are going to drop. So if you got any investments in,
I don't have
S&P
any.
or, Wall Street or anything like that, or even the commodities market out of Chicago, if you got anything invested in any of those stocks, you better get out now because they're going to go crashing. Okay.
Just as our normal disclaimer, we're not financial people. We're not financial advisors. So all of this is just opinion. We don't know any better. So we're not giving advice, right?
Well, thing is, I'm not saying this because I'm an expert. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm quoting experts. They're all saying this.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, okay, at first I told myself, well, I don't pay any attention to these guys. They're just doing whatever they do. But the problem is when you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, then I start to pay attention. Okay.
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I listen to them as well, and I am seeing problems with the US dollar. I'm seeing the economy is kind of, they're saying it's doing well, but you can't believe these guys.
No. Well, it depends on who you listen to. If you listen to the economists, we're not doing well. If you listen to Yellen, we are in Powell, we are doing well. See,
correct.
There's a huge gap there.
No, I have more confidence in Richard Wolff.
Yeah.
He's the real deal.
Right. That's exactly. And it's not just him. Okay. Yeah. I like I said, Alina Petrova, I listen to a lot of her guests.
Me too.
Some of them you take with a grain of salt, but for the most part, if you read between the lines, they're all saying the same thing. Okay. And, same thing with, I told you about Stephen Van Meter. I listened to his podcast. Now, granted, he is trying to sell his company, but if you tune that out and you listen to what he's actually telling you with his charts and statistics, you look at what's going on and like, oh, okay. And if you are not,
you listen to go ahead.
I was going to say, if you know anything at all about reading charts, you can see it.
Right. Okay. Do you listen to Sean Fu? He's a guy in Singapore. I'll send you some links. He is good. He's good. I like him. And he's all about getting into gold and protecting your wealth, because he says that bad things are coming.
Yeah. Well,
So
my biggest thing about all of this is bad things are coming, but I think for the most part, it's only for the United States and the West, the G7 bloc. Okay. BRICS alliance right now, you're going from here to here. You know what I mean?
I have an interesting point for you. There's all this talk about closing the border and preventing people from coming in.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't pay attention to the other way. It also prevents us from leaving.
Well, remember what I told you in the very beginning of the show, how China has locked up their borders. They're letting people out. So
No.
are the Americans going to do the same thing?
Well, as an immigrant, it's difficult for me to get. I have to document all my money, what's
Okay.
in the country, what's out of the country, and I do, right? I keep everything legit.
Right.
But you can't leave the country. If you're leaving the country, you have to declare the amount of money that you're leaving with in immigration, and there are limits,
Right.
right? So you can't leave the U.S. So the thing, you can't bring into the U.S. more than $9,999 without declaring it. They might think it's drug money or whatever, but you can't leave without declaring it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why people are interested in crypto and all that. They can take the money and nobody needs to know. But the fact is that the financial authorities keep close track of you wherever you are. As an American, you have to declare your taxes wherever you work in the world.
That's right.
Because they want your taxes no matter where you are.
That's right.
So you are part of their asset base.
Yep.
And we think that it's a good thing because we live in the US, but you can't leave. You can't take your money with you.
No.
And wherever you go, they want to know what you're doing.
Well, the only way to
escape,
the only way to escape that, and this is a lot of stories I've read over the last couple of years from people who went to work for European companies, for example. It was about a year and a half ago. I read this article from an expat. She's American, working for a Swedish company, I think it was, or Danish company. Okay, had been overseas for 10 years or so, and as an American citizen, of course, she was complaining about having the draconian tax structure of both dealing with the Danes because of she's working for a Danish company, and also any assets she had in the United States that she had to pay taxes on is there, and the paperwork was huge. She was having to pay all kinds of extra money for a tax lawyer in order to keep her stuff straight. And it was costing her like huge amounts of money to keep this straight every year. She was tired of it. So then she started digging into giving up her American passport. And that's when she found out that the American government fights that tooth and nail to keep people from giving up their American passports.
They make it so hard. $5,000 from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, it's very expensive to do this.
Yeah.
To just walk into an embassy and drop your passport on the desk and say, I'm done. They don't let you just do that. You have to fill out paperwork. And I think it's like $1,500 or something like that.
Well, here's the thing that is interesting is that they consider us. The strength of the US dollar is based on our ability to repay the US debt. And the debts are how many trillions of dollars now. And the people that have to pay are you and me.
Yeah.
And they're not going to let us go.
No.
We are their asset base and not without a fight. Right? So So look, be careful when you think about the borders. Shutting the borders keeps people in as much as it keeps people out.
Yeah.
So, look at that. Take that with a grain of salt.
Well, the big thing is the American government doesn't have a problem with you living in another country as long as you don't give up your American citizenship.
And pay your taxes wherever you are.
Pay your taxes.
Wherever you are.
Wherever you are. Yeah, that's all they care about.
You got to pay Uncle Sam his pound of flesh.
As long as you follow the rules. The rules are, if you're an expat, and I knew this from, 30 some years ago. I knew some people. So the tax structure is such that if you are, let's say you're working outside the United States, on a long-term basis, once a year, you have to return to the United States for an X amount of time in order for you to maintain your American citizenship and pay your taxes.
Right. Even when we were, even as green card holders, there's a limit of the amount of time that you can be out of the country.
Right.
Otherwise, you give up your green card.
That's right.
You see, so they don't mess around. You need to be here. They want you here.
They want you here. Yeah. And you're right. It all comes down to the money. Okay. They can't stand to lose even $1 from any one citizen because they act like we're stealing from them.
But the thing about it is they give tax breaks to the wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And as Richard Wolff points out, instead of the wealthy paying their fair share of taxes, they allow them to loan money back to the U.S. government by purchasing treasuries or whatever that they will do. So that the wealthy people lend the U.S. money in terms of taxes, but then we have to pay back the wealthy people their money plus interest from our jobs, our taxes.
Sure.
Right? And they get offered less taxes and loans and interest-bearing loans that they make money off of. and all we need to do is tax them properly,
Well,
so that
that's
the
just
government
it.
doesn't need to lend them money. That's
Yeah.
unfair.
Yeah, well, it is. And as you said earlier, push is coming to shove pretty soon. There's going to be a serious pushback very soon. I would say that an impetus for this is if we go into a major recession here this
Right.
winter, you're going to wait and it's going to have a major impact on everything. There are going to be a lot of angry people probably hitting the streets, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with that. I don't
But
know.
if that happens, I mean,
Scary.
we can expect everything to slow down. So
Oh yeah.
think about it. Think about it another way. Passports. All the president has to do is sign something that says he's slowing that down, the process, for whatever reason. He doesn't need to
Yeah.
give a reason anymore. Maybe garbage won't be picked up as often. Maybe the trucks won't be running as often because gas might be short. Who knows?
That's right.
People got to pump gas. So everything will slow down. I
Mhm.
mean, it's going to be,
Yeah. No. Well,
It's gonna
anybody
be-
that
it's gonna be
remembers what it
something.
was like here, 2008, 2009, and even 2010, and in the outlying areas of the country, that's exactly what happened. We had a major slowdown because one,
Right.
gas prices went way up,
Right.
and it basically brought the country to a near halt. Okay, and nobody wants that again, but it's coming.
Yeah. And I think they say we're just 3 days away from rioting in the streets when there's no food, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, that's again, it's gonna be an interesting summer. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen with the Democrats right now because they're like a kicked over anthill right now,
Mhm.
and I'm waiting to see. I'm kind of waiting to see how that's going to work out. I'm scared of Joe Biden taking the reins in November, but yet the Democrats don't have an alternative, a good one. And
No, we're actually voting for the vice president at this point.
yeah, I mean, what are we going to do? Do a write-in on the ballots in November? I mean, you could do that, but it's a little late in the game to get the word out at this point.
Yeah. It's a pity Bernie isn't running. Because the thing about it is, there's a quote that I always repeat in my articles, and I'll just repeat it for you. It goes something like, capitalism without socialism becomes fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And socialism without capitalism becomes communism. So a little bit of socialism seems to be necessary to smoothen out the excesses of either system.
Yeah.
So if we can build a little bit of socialism into capitalism, and when we say socialism, we're talking about public health, transportation, better education, better food,
Right.
better housing, affordable housing. We're
Yep.
not talking about anything extreme that people would take advantage of other people's work.
Right.
Basically, simple safety nets that people can live in that will make the quality of life so much better.
Mm-hmm.
If we can build that in, so it's not full-on socialism. So we're
Right.
not going all the way to the left. So that's what I'm looking at in France, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Socialists have won, but they don't need to go all the way into socialism
And they
and
probably
forget
won't.
that they probably won't, right?
No.
So we need to have a little bit of it. And what we're having now is socialism for the wealthy. When the businesses collapse, the government bails them out. When the banks get into trouble, the government bails them out.
Right.
We don't need socialism for them.
The big thing
We need
about
it
that
first.
right now is like somebody was saying here earlier this week, is that that's not going to happen this time. Once the banks start failing, there's no bailout coming.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the problem, is because that's not going to happen this time. Biden said something about it earlier, but as we know, you can't believe anything Biden says at this point because he's not running the show. Okay.
Well, we don't know if he remembers what he says from one day to the next.
He probably doesn't. Okay. So the other side of that is because, we probably already know that his aides and or staff and or whatever you want to call them, his minions is what I like to call them. Okay. They're running the show. So they're the ones who are calling the shots. But Congress is the ones, House of Republicans, basically. They're the ones who hold the purse strings. So they would have to sign off on any kind of bailout, and the Republicans already said, no, we're not doing it.
Wow.
Yeah. So if the banks start
Okay.
failing between now and November, the Republicans aren't going to bail them out. Now, if the Democrats take back the House and keep the Senate, they might. The Democrats
Okay.
have no problem at all about spending buttloads of money they don't have. They've been that way for decades.
We need to do something about that. I don't know
Exactly.
what, but we need to
Well, it
do
goes
something
back to
about
what you were
that.
saying, is that we need to have a government that listens to the people. Okay?
I don't know why
We're
they stopped.
saying we don't want to bail these people out because look what it cost us last time. Okay? Let them fail. All right? We'll
Mhm.
pick up the pieces after it's over with. Just don't
Mhm.
don't make it so that we lose our money. In other words, FDIC,
Honor the
the
FDIC,
FDIC
yeah.
stuff, insurance. I mean, if I got money, my personal funds are in the bank, I don't need to lose that. That would
Right.
devastate everybody. And,
Yeah.
me, you, and everybody else, we obviously don't want to lose our savings because the banks fail. Okay.
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
if the government stood behind the FDIC and made sure that nobody went hungry because the banks are failing, you would see a different attitude. Okay.
Right.
Because we don't really care about commercial real estate. We don't care about the corporations. All we care about is our bank accounts.
Yep.
If we knew the government stood behind that, it would keep us from losing our money. We could care less as a people. We could
Right.
care less what the rest of them, whatever happens to the rest of them. We don't care.
Yeah.
Let them fall.
Well, what I understand though is that, like, a lot of hedge funds or people that maintain pension funds, they invest in commercial real estate.
Yes.
So some of those pension funds
Are going to go
may
bust.
get bankrupted, and that could be tragic for a lot of
Oh,
older
yeah.
people who are,
It is.
you know.
It is. Well, again, it goes
So
back to
bail
that
those out.
FDR thing, because that's what happened in happened in 1929.
Hmm.
Okay. All of those, investment portfolios that they had in the 20s went belly
Right.
up. All these
Hmm.
people lost their livelihoods, pensions, and so on and so forth. And everybody ended up on, losing everything. So FDR put protections in place to keep that from happening again. But,
Mhm.
our legislative leaders have gutted those protections.
Correct. And we need to get
from the
those back.
19
We need to get
those
some of
back.
those back.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right.
Because
But we need a president who's willing to do that. And right now we don't have that.
Oh, no. Well, it's not likely to come out of this current batch of
Nope.
people that we have.
No.
So,
Well, here's the other part of the equation. I listened to Kamala Harris, one of her things here a couple of weeks ago,
hmm.
and she said that if, that's a big if, Joe Biden steps aside, she's willing to step in. And one of the first things she wants to do is a ceasefire in Gaza. And she wants to negotiate with the Russians to stop all this business overseas. And she wants to start working on the American economy. Okay. Now,
If she means it, then we have somebody that can do some stuff.
well, it goes
If
back
she
to
means
what
it.
you were saying earlier. Doesn't matter what she says. It's all about Americans. Americans look at our leaders as like Hollywood movie stars. Okay.
Okay.
So do you look, does Kamala Harris look like a Hollywood movie star? A
She
strong presidential Hollywood movie star? No.
No, she
Like
doesn't.
you said, she's female and she's got dark skin. Okay.
America isn't ready for that.
Against her right there. Doesn't
America
really
isn't ready for
matter how good she can do the job. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Because American perception has nothing to do with her ability or what her resume
Right.
is.
Correct. I agree with that.
And that's unfortunate. Because there's
But
some very well qualified
we're being
people.
realistic here. We're being
Yeah.
realistic,
Yeah,
It's
there's
not
well
likely.
qualified people who could step in, but they're not electable because of what they look like.
Mm.
And it's
Well,
a shame.
It's a shame, but we got to survive this.
Well,
So
there's survival and then there's survival. Okay.
let's hope
What
it's not
worries me-
survival, right?
Survival on the low end is not pretty. I've been there. And I'm not
Yeah,
looking forward to it again.
I don't want to do that at all. Right?
Yeah, well,
So-
there you go. Okay. I have at one time in my life, I was pretty much on the bottom rung, as a
Yeah.
kid growing up. And then, in a brief spite in the late 90s, for about 4 or 5 years. I was one of those very poor deplorables that Hillary Clinton talked about.
Right.
Okay. And so I know what that's like, and I have no
Right.
desire to go back there.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, I mean, when I came here to the US as an immigrant, you would think that this is the land of milk and honey, right? When you go to the supermarkets, they're packed. You go to Walmart, you see things that you don't see anywhere else in the world. The choice, the variety, just the sheer availability of things that you think everybody here is wealthy and everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
Only when you live here and you realize
not so.
It's a show.
Exactly.
It's not true. It's not real.
Not at all. No, it's a fantasy put out by the American marketer and advertisers saying how good the United States is, but it's a hollow shell.
It's a hollow shell. It really is. If you don't have money, you don't live in that world. You live on the low end. You live with whatever you can eat whenever you can, and sometimes you don't.
Well, it goes back to, I told you, I wrote in my newsletter this week about my youngest son coming to visit me.
Yeah.
And
how did that go?
I already knew, just from stories coming out of where he was living. I didn't know how true they were, but I kind of knew that he was struggling with everything.
Yeah.
But he sat down with me for a couple of days while he was here, and we talked at long lengths about his circumstances. He's in his mid-20s, and he's telling me, what life is like for not just him, but for all the people that his peer group. Okay.
Yeah.
His generation. His generation.
Daughter,
yeah. Your daughter. Yeah. Garrett. There you go. Exactly. Okay. So yeah, it's countrywide. And yet it only makes minimal in the news because probably by design. But
the media doesn't say what it needs to say. They bought and paid for.
Well, media right now lives on clickbait. Okay.
Yeah.
And doing fluff pieces on poor 20-somethings is not clickbait. Okay?
Right.
So, you're going to get minimal coverage on stuff like that.
I write about it every so often.
Yeah. Michelle Teo, out of Illinois, she writes about it all the time. But the big thing is I remember my own times, like I said, from the late 90s. And then, talking to my youngest son here this week, and it kind of hit me full force of what, not just him, but they're all going through, from here to the West Coast. And those are the kind of people that are going to get tired and say, enough's enough, and we're going to do something. My son has been involved with some protests and of that kind of thing, small amount, but I could see where, things start to get really bad. Cause I know for a fact, he didn't really come right out and say it, but I know for a fact that he's not eating 3 meals a day. And,
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
He's living in a place where the house he's living in right now is literally crumbling down around his head. Okay. It should be condemned.
Right.
I say that only because I know the house he's living in.
Right.
I've seen it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So I know about it, and I'm thinking, well, this is what these people are forced to live in, circumstances.
Right.
They're going to get tired of this quickly. It won't take much
this
longer.
is it. And protests, there are different kinds of protests in the sense of, okay, I don't want to work as hard as I could. I don't want to make kids and bring them into this country. I'm not going to try to pay your Social Security. I'm just speaking like how the young people might speak. I'm not going to try to make your Social Security on my labor when I don't have a livable circumstance. I'm not going to do it. Right. So they're protesting. If they're not doing it physically in the streets, there are other ways that they can make a big change. I'm not going to be buying coffees every day.
Right.
I don't care to go to work. I want to work from home. So all of these things have economic impacts. And I don't think that the people that are in charge can safely justify spending $100 billion in a war in Ukraine. And your son is living where the house is collapsing around him.
Right.
It's just not right.
No, it's not.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Well, the big thing is I look at him and I realize that he is a microcosm of all the other young people across the country, just like him.
Yeah.
See, and it's like, okay, how did we get to this point where our young people are bearing the brunt of all of this? Where did we fail them? That's
Yeah,
kind of what I'm thinking.
well, the minute you have a government policy there where foreign interests trump local affairs, I mean,
Right.
and
Oh, that's
they've
the
been
biggest
figuring
failure.
out how much they can squeeze the American people
Hmm.
to get what they want overseas, because the money that goes overseas isn't physically going overseas.
No.
They're recycling it into the military
Right.
industrial complex,
That's right.
and it stays here and it fills their coffers.
That's
They
right.
get wealthy off of it.
That's
We
right.
don't know what kind of kickbacks are taking place. We
Well,
just
the big thing is, somebody was talking about this a few weeks ago. One of the guys on the judge's show, he was saying this very same thing: is that the American government is paying the contractors for for all of their hardware and munitions. Okay, these same people are selling that stuff on credit to these foreign countries.
right.
Now, as we know right now, Ukraine will never ever be able to pay that back.
No,
So these
Ukraine can't pay that.
corporations that are selling this stuff, where are they going to? Well, they're already getting paid. They're getting paid by the government up front. So
Right.
they don't care if they get paid by the Ukrainian government because
Right.
they've already got their money.
Right. And the other thing about it is the money is being devalued under our feet as we speak, because they're getting the money. Inflation is taking away the value of what we've been saving and trying to live on. So it's affecting us. It's
Yes,
making
it's
our
only gonna
lives harder.
And it's going to continue to get worse.
And it's
See,
going to
that's-
continue until
Yeah.
it comes to a head and people say enough.
Well, I'm kind of watching things pretty closely to see when that's coming because
Well,
I want to be able
don't
to duck and cover when
wanna
it
be around
comes.
for that.
Yeah,
Correct. I'm going to be
Yeah.
hiding.
yeah.
So-
So I don't know. So listen, I'm going to go
Right.
ahead and cut this loose.
No trouble at all, my friend.
Yeah.
This was a nice chat.
It was. I'm sorry, Miss Francis couldn't stick around for this, and I don't. It goes back to what we were just talking about. Like she said in the beginning, she's been waiting on an air conditioning compressor she can't afford for a couple of years now. Okay,
Mhm.
so she got no AC in her house.
I didn't
And-
realize it was so bad because it's 90
Well,
degrees over there.
Only this summer that she says it was this bad.
Oh my
okay.
God.
Humidity level went to the point where it's massively uncomfortable, but she's got no way to control it because of global warming. Okay.
Right.
So now she's suffering. And that's not the only problem she has. But
No,
you got to
because of
understand. So
infrastructure.
we were just talking about the mid 20 something generation of how they are right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Unless the mid 20s are coming from a rich family, but your average, I don't know what generation they're calling it. Was it Gen Z? I think they call themselves.
I think it's Gen Z, yeah. I think
Gen
it's Gen
Zs,
Z.
okay, whatever that is. But their demographic, their generation right now, across the board, suffering, economically is way above everybody else as far as economic strata is concerned. So now you have her; she's in a different generation, but yet she's in economic position. She's just barely hanging on, like a lot of other Americans.
Mhm.
She's barely, she's kind of barely hanging in there. Can't afford certain things, but she was able to get by until now. But she still can't afford to fix it. But now she's got to suffer more because circumstances, environmentally, have created, exasperated the issues. But she's stuck
Right.
between a rock and a hard place. She
Yeah.
still don't have any
Yeah.
money. She can't do anything about it. So now she got to suffer even more. How many other people across the country are doing this? Okay.
Right.
Or how going
And
through
then, and if you think about it, Texas got one hurricane. The hurricane season hasn't even begun.
right.
One more, and they're going to be a year out before they get power coming back.
Probably.
Just
And
imagine
Congress
that.
not doing much about it.
It's
Going
amazing.
hand in, he's got his hat in his hand going to the federal government saying, help us. But the problem is that they can't do anything too much because everything's privatized. Okay.
How did it become privatized? I'm sure the
let it
governor of
happen.
that state has
It's-
something to answer for.
Well, it's about the money. You privatize utilities, then they now pay taxes to the state. If you
Right.
have a a state-run utility, there's no tax base. Okay.
Right.
You pay into that as a subscriber, but it's not as much as a private entity paying taxes to the state government.
Now, you see, this is where my argument for socialism should come in.
Yeah.
Certain things should not be for profit,
Right.
and infrastructure like that should not be for profit.
That's right.
Let the government pay whoever needs to be paid and keep them
Right.
honest.
Well, last fall, state of Maine had a big referendum election over that very same thing.
I didn't know.
They've been ripped up. They've been, they have been. There were two electric utility companies there in the state, and they both were ripping off everybody left and right. And one of them is even owned by a corporation out of Saudi Arabia. Okay, they're a Canadian company owned by a Saudi Arabian company. All right. So these are the people providing electricity to the state of Maine. So the states put out for a vote to make the utilities public rather than private. And the vote didn't go like it wanted to, but it did get the attention of these corporations, and they changed how they're doing business because it got their attention. Okay.
Because they're going to
pretty close.
Start losing. Yeah.
Yeah. The vote was pretty close.
They're going to start losing.
So now, last word I read, this was several months ago, that the utilities are basically now starting to listen to the state government and the people and, trying to do a little bit more. But again, it's one of those deals where it came very close. It Maine's, a bit kind of radical in some ways, as far as that goes. So, but like I said, now would Texas do something like that? No, because the state government of Texas is taking money from the corporations and they don't care about the people.
I understand. Abbott, the governor of Texas.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I think he's somewhere overseas.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So they're not gonna. They have their golden parachutes are already in place. They don't need to worry about anything.
They don't care.
They don't care.
No, they don't care. See, that's a problem. And, goes back to a lot of other red states. The politicians are run the same vein in that they have their safety nets all set up. They don't care. Whatever happens, if a storm hits, they're covered. They can either bail like Ted Cruz did a couple of years back in 2021. Went to Mexico.
Cancun
Ted. The state was freezing. Okay. And got caught at the airport. They didn't go over very well.
And he left his dog at home.
Yeah, but like I said, that's how they are. We know that.
My God.
At some point, it's all going to come crashing down. My concern is, is it going to be bad crash or is it going to be a semi-soft landing and we get something out of the ashes?
Well, I think I was reading somewhere that at least we should be mindful of it enough that we prepare a community response.
Yeah.
We need to develop the community to see what's coming and to support each other and help when it needs to be helped, because we can't rely on the government. They're going to be caught up by somebody else. They're not going to take care of us when it's time to be when we need it.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. And I've been saying this all along. Don't depend on the government to take care of you, because they won't. They're either going to bail,
they may not be able to,
or they're not going to be able to altogether.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's more likely to be that. Yeah. That they're going to be so caught up with everything else.
Yeah.
That we would slip through the cracks.
Yeah. Well, we're already slipping through the cracks. Okay.
Right.
The cracks are getting wider and wider almost
every
month.
There you go. And more people are going to start slipping through them.
Well, there's a lot of tech companies right now doing a lot, hundreds and thousands worth of layoffs right here in the United States. There's a bunch of them happening overseas, but I'm watching also a lot of the trade papers, and these IT companies are laying off like crazy. And so there's more of that coming along. So this whole business of the unemployment rate being low, it's ticking upwards. And a lot of it is the government is not reporting accurately what's actually going on, but eventually it's going to catch up with them. And you're going to see at some point, the cat's going to get out of the bag, and all of a sudden, boom.
Right. Yesterday, I had a package come in from Amazon. I bought some seeds, and the package was empty. They didn't send the seeds.
Wow.
So I contacted customer service, and I chatted with someone for about 15 minutes until I realized it was a bot. It wasn't a human being.
Wow.
I was asking questions, and it was answering, and then it said, hold on, I need to get a human being to that effect.
That's AI.
so that we can get somebody physically to take it further, because I can't do anymore.
Right.
You know, that's one less person to employ.
It's a strange new world now. And
One less
that's another
person
thing they were talking
cutting
about
the
in that
paycheck.
in Annie Jacobson's book, in her podcast with Sean Ryan, they
you
talked
enjoyed
a
that
lot about
podcast, didn't you?
AI, and
Right.
they talked a lot about AI and how it would not be an influence on ICBMs, okay,
Right, because they're
because of
analog,
the
right?
older technology, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it also is having an effect. Well, they're incorporating it into a lot of other things in the military industrial complex.
You remember that article I sent for you
Well,
this
that
morning?
goes back to that article you sent me
That
from
scared the
Israel.
crap out of me, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
saying, there's a score attached to everyone, and
Well,
they can
think about this.
decide how many
You
casualties they
remember
want.
the old Terminator movies when Arnold Schwarzenegger? Yeah.
I
Well,
enjoyed those.
that's almost a thing now. Not the robots, but the actual AI technology behind them.
I mean, saying that you can tell who your targets are and who your high value targets are,
Right.
and you can figure out how many people you want to kill based on who's
Sure.
around them, because you're monitoring their movements.
Right.
I mean, that's terrifying.
It is. Well, think about this. One of the things that Miss Jacobson and Sean were talking about, and also in the podcast, was that China's use of AI for facial recognition,
Yeah,
how
I've been
people
looking at
walk, how they, their body language is all being recorded right now and
Right.
put on massive databases. So
Right.
she said that what was it? Either he said, one of the two of them mentioned how people realize this over in China, and they're actually putting rocks in their shoes to
Yeah.
change how they walk, so the cameras don't recognize them anymore.
I saw that. Yeah. Because they what's it called? Gait analysis, something like that. They analyze how you walk. Isn't that
I mean,
something?
that's how bad this surveillance state is getting everywhere.
Yeah.
And it goes along with what your video about the Israelis. Okay.
Right.
So this stuff is getting out of hand. I mean, you
It's
have to
getting
wonder
terrible.
what the United States, I mean, they're not telling us, but you have to wonder that the United States isn't deploying something like that.
Of course they are.
Of course they
Of course
are.
they are. Of course they are. I saw. I mean, I hope I'm not keeping the conversation going,
Yeah, we
and you
go a
need to
little bit.
stop. Yeah. Okay. Have you seen the Blade Runners in England?
No.
All right. So what they are, it's a group of people that don't accept that England is increasing their surveillance, because they're putting up these high-tech cameras that can tell if you're jaywalking. They can tell who you are, of course, facial recognition, and they're issuing tickets automatically. So AI is involved. High-tech cameras everywhere.
Right.
So these guys are masking up, black clothing, and they're walking around with portable saws, and they're cutting them down. And they call themselves Blade Runners. You can look it up if you're interested to see what. So it's a movement of younger people. It's not going to be older people,
Right.
who are gathering together to resist surveillance.
Huh.
And I thought that it's a trend. I think that's going to get bigger.
I could see that catching on. It'll start in Europe.
I can see that
if it's in
catching
the UK, the Europeans will pick it up, and then it'll end up
Yeah.
over in the United States eventually.
Eventually, because people are not going to accept that.
Yeah.
The government depends on us towing their lines.
Right.
And those people aren't happy with it, so they're not going
No.
to take it.
Well,
know?
considering the state of affairs here in the United States, I could seriously see that happening.
Yeah, I looked up recently the number of people that have been shooting up substations, electrical substations.
Oh, yeah.
Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I've heard about it. Not recently, but it is
Look
happening.
into it, because it seems that it's not gone away.
Huh? They're still doing it.
It's still doing it, right? You just don't see it in the news for obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah.
The media doesn't say anything. But if you look for the information, you'll see a couple hundred of them
you gotta-
being done every so often.
Huh?
In the rural areas, of course, it's not
Right,
necessarily
right.
in town. And I mean, the resistance movements are already here.
Huh? Well,
Think about
good.
it now, from that perspective, right?
Yeah. I mean, I got solar panels, so if they want to knock my power out, I'm okay as long as I got daylight.
There you go. I'm actually thinking about doing the solar panels. So
Well,
I'm
you got
thinking
one more
about
sun
it.
down there where you're at than I got where I'm at.
Well, the challenge for us is the hurricanes will blow everything off
Yeah.
the roof.
Yeah, that's the
So
only thing.
it's going to be an issue for if I get insurance can I
Right.
rebuild? Because
Right.
when you buy them, they're yours, and
Yeah.
you need to insure them and all that. It's yours.
Right.
It's not going. Will the insurance continue to pick it up? If it gets blown off, I'll have to change the roof because it's bolted
sure.
into the roof,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
know.
a place that can pick wind up and it'll rip
Right.
right off.
I know. Yeah. And then I got kind of the situation here too. I don't have winds like you got and get down there,
Yeah.
or as it goes.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, I've got them mounted to my roof, so
Right.
I do concern myself with the weather a little bit, so
Right.
I'm kind of keeping an eye on things.
Well, we
So
get hurricanes 5,
yeah,
6 a year, right? So
you
it's
do. Yeah.
sooner or later it's going to blow off my roof, and then I'll have to replace the roof. So
Mm,
I'm balancing: do I want the convenience of that as opposed to having to put in a roof every time?
right.
It might be easier just to get a generator and some propane.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there's that. I don't know.
So,
Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. All
Yeah.
right, boss. So I'm going to go ahead and let this go.
no problem. I'll leave
Okay.
it going.
I
And
appreciate, we'll have to say something to Miss Francis here. But I appreciate
yeah, I feel bad
you
for
on
her.
again. And we'll continue to feed each other news things as we catch them.
All right. I'm glad you
and-
enjoyed that last one with Sean Ryan.
Yeah, I really wasn't yesterday when I watched part of it. I really hadn't planned on picking up the rest of it. But then this
Right.
morning I had a little downtime and I thought, let me check this out while I could watch it and do other things at the same time.
Yeah, I
And
did that.
the second half of that is definitely worth checking into.
I'll give it I watched about half of it already, so I'll look at the
Yeah.
second half later
I would
today.
watch the rest of it. I mean, the
Yeah.
UFO stuff and Area 51 stuff, you can kind of let it go because it's really not that big a deal. But all the
Right.
things that she says about nuclear Armageddon, yeah, you definitely need to pay attention to that.
Okay. I'll listen to it tonight.
Guys, well, it's like you asked me about when you sent me the video, is how accurate is this? Well,
Yeah,
will
I
tell
don't have any reference.
based on all the training that I went through a couple
Yeah.
decades ago, she's spot on.
All right. So then that's what I was wondering. Is it worth the listen? Because
No,
I don't
it
want to
is.
listen to fluff. So
No,
if
it's
you
not
say it's
fluff.
worth it,
No, it's
I'm
spot
going to
on.
listen to it.
She's very
All right.
accurate. She actually expanded a lot, a lot of things that I already knew with
Right.
a lot more detail, only because she interviewed a lot of people. And some
Yeah.
of the people that she talked about who she interviewed, I recognize their names. So I know that she's
Right.
done due diligence.
Because as I was looking through the comments, and a lot of people were saying she's talking out her, out of her
Plus,
butt.
they
but
don't know any better.
They don't
But
know
I
any
know
better.
I've heard of the people that she interviewed. So I
Right.
know how accurate she is.
My
Okay.
goodness. So then
Yeah.
I definitely need to listen to this.
Yeah. I mean, these people, that these names that she pulled out from, when she interviewed at Los Alamos, guys that, were retired after that, and,
Right.
admirals and generals and stuff. Yeah, I know these people.
Okay.
So I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, if you talk to so-and-so, then
Yeah,
I
she
know
drops a lot of names. I
she dropped a
noticed
lot
that.
of names that I recognize from the old days.
Wow. Okay. I'll give it a good listen tonight. I may have an article coming out about it.
Yeah,
So,
that would be fine. As far as the book is concerned, I'll leave that up to you if you want to read it. But I would seriously, if you have an opportunity, because I know that Neville Shute's book from 1957.
right.
It's not that many pages, so it'll be
I kept a
quick
copy
read.
of them, so I'm going to go look for them in my public
It's a
library.
quick read, as far as
Right.
most books go. The Last Ship is a little more.
Okay.
It's quite a few more pages, but it's definitely worth reading.
Right.
In that respect. And then if you read those two, and if you really, really want to know more, read Miss Annie's book, because it will
gosh.
definitely expound everything that you read about in the first two.
Let's just say I don't want a nuclear war because I don't think
Nobody
I would.
does.
I don't think I would walk right into it. I don't want to survive that.
Yeah, nobody. No,
I don't want to
nobody
live
wants,
through that.
nobody
Mhm.
wants that, and we all know that. The government people know that. Unfortunately, we have some idiots who think that they can mitigate it and they would survive. They're stupid. Okay,
They're stupid.
they're stupid.
They are stupid.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So
All right.
I think they should do a basic training and do advanced infantry training and then have a conversation about how stupid they want to be after that.
They should all fight wars first.
Yes.
Anytime you want a war, you need to be on the front lines.
That's right. You need some actual
Yeah, you need
combat
some actual
experience.
combat, and then tell me you want war. Yeah.
Yeah. So, So anyway, appreciate you. Okay.
Same here. I'll leave it
do this
running,
again.
and you.
We'll swap articles here over the next time or so.
No problem.
And we'll keep track of each other. And we'll see how that goes.
All right.
We'll have to work something out with
We'll
Miss
see how it
French
goes.
because she keeps dropping out on us. I don't know if she wants to continue.
Yeah, and I think this frustrates her as well. So
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, we'll see. So anyway,
We'll
I'm
see.
gonna let you go. Appreciate it. Okay, and I'll talk to you
Same here.
again. All right.
Talk to you
Bye.
again, my friend. Take it easy. Bye.
So that's what we have here for this week. Our discussion here again, current affairs, and now this new stuff on nuclear Armageddon, only because of all of the rhetoric going on about Ukraine. So you think about all this. If you watch this video, we've given you a lot of things to think about, and how things are here in the United States. So appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk to you again here next week. Sláinte. While I still have your attention, I want to tell you about how you can support this podcast and my efforts in general. This podcast will continue to remain free to subscribe to on all the major mobile podcast apps, on my YouTube channel, Krana Biha, and for the first 30 days on my Substack page, Krana Biha, the Tree of Life at Substack.com. With that in mind, I'm asking for donations of any amount. I decided that I would rather ask for donations instead of charging subscriptions, so everyone has an opportunity to watch or listen to this podcast everywhere in the world. All I'm asking for is help in defraying the cost to produce and distribute this podcast and maintain my website. I've set up a donation tab on the Village Oak Tree webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.kranabiha.com, which are all linked to PayPal for your security. This way you can use any currency you wish from around the world, providing PayPal is available to you. Any amount's appreciated. Now, about my website. The easiest way to find it is to copy it from the background behind me if you're watching this video. If you're listening to an audio version, copy the website name from the podcast logo shown. Search for it and enjoy your visit. Lastly, I'm trying to sell some copies of my book, Fugitives in the New United States, which can be found at major book retailers around the world, such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Lulu. You can also buy from me direct through the bookstore page on my website. Fugitives in the New United States is available in hardcover, paperback, and digital form. Free if you're a Kindle subscriber. It's written for young adults and older, so it's safe. If this were a movie, it'd be rated PG. Look for Fugitives in the New United States at your favorite book retailer and enjoy it. If I sell enough, I'll find the time to write the second book in this series. So I want to thank you for your support, even if it's just a like and a subscribe on my social media accounts. Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll return again next week for another episode of the Village Oak Tree. Please like, subscribe, and reply on the YouTube video or audio version. This helps with spreading the word about what I'm trying to do, which is to shout out to the world about all the bad things our governments are doing to us. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May your hand always be stretched out in friendship and never in want. Slán go fóill.